Belgian Cenotaph parade 18 horse guards. Horse guards, Royal Guard, King's Guard, Horse, London. From a young age, he would sit in his room, leafing through old books, letters, and photographs, imagining the people who lived long before him. He grew up hearing stories from his grandparents about the bravery of soldiers during the world wars and the deep bonds between countries like Belgium and Britain. Every story seemed alive in his mind, each detail painting a picture of courage, sacrifice, and honor. It was no wonder that, when he learned about the Belgian Cenotaph parade taking place in London, he knew he had to see it with his own eyes. The night before his journey, John could hardly sleep. He carefully packed his camera, notebook, and a small collection of his grandfather's letters, wanting to carry a piece of his own family history with him. Outside, the wind whispered through the streets of Brussels, and John imagined the streets of London waiting for him, full of history, tradition, and solemn respect. He had read about Horse Guards parade many times, seen photographs of its impressive layout, the red-coated soldiers, and the proud horses, but seeing it in person was a dream that felt both exciting and humbling. The next morning, John woke up early, his heart racing with anticipation. He looked out the window to see a soft, gray light filtering through the clouds, and he felt a chill in the air, a perfect morning for a parade steeped in history. The streets of London were quiet as he made his way to the famous Horse Guards parade. But as he walked closer, he could already hear the faint sound of hooves clattering in the distance, echoing against the grand buildings that lined the path. The sound made his pulse quicken. It was the kind of sound that carried weight, a rhythm that had been part of ceremonies for centuries. When John finally arrived at Horse Guards, he was struck by its size and beauty. The parade ground stretched out before him, surrounded by tall, historic buildings. It was a space that felt alive with history. He could see soldiers preparing, adjusting their uniforms and brushing down their horses. The red tunics of the Royal and King's Guards shone vividly against the gray winter sky, and the bearskin hats added an almost majestic grandeur to their appearance. John could not help but admire the meticulous precision with which every detail was managed. Everything seemed perfect, as if time itself had paused to honor the traditions of the past. Crowds were beginning to gather, people from different countries, all dressed in warm coats and scarves, jostled slightly for a better view. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, trying to catch a glimpse of the soldiers and the horses. Cameras clicked constantly, capturing every angle, while journalists with notepads scribbled furiously, preparing to document the event. John found a spot near the front, close enough to see the expressions on the soldiers' faces and the controlled power in the horses' movements. He felt a sense of excitement mixed with respect. This was more than just a parade. It was a living tribute, a moment when history came alive before everyone's eyes. As he waited, John noticed the Belgian contingent assembling. Their uniforms were slightly different, yet equally elegant, and they carried their flags with pride. The sight reminded John of the stories his grandfather had told him, of brave men marching through difficult times, relying on discipline and unity. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He realized that these soldiers were not only honoring their own country, but also paying homage to a shared history, a bond between Belgium and Britain that had endured through war and peace. The significance of the moment began to sink in. He was witnessing a connection that had been carefully preserved for generations, a tradition that gave life to the sacrifices of the past. While waiting for the parade to begin, John struck up conversations with other spectators. There was a family from Belgium who had traveled specifically to see the parade, and an elderly couple from London who came every year to watch and pay their respects. Each person seemed to have their own story, their own reason for being there, yet they all shared the same sense of reverence. John felt a quiet joy in being part of this collective experience. He realized that history was not only something you read about in books, It was something you felt, something that could touch your heart deeply when experienced firsthand. Finally, the moment arrived. The soldiers took their positions, and the sound of the drums echoed through the air. Horses stamped their hooves impatiently, their breath forming small clouds in the chilly morning. The royal and king's guards stood at attention, their eyes focused and disciplined, their presence commanding respect. John watched in awe as the parade began to move, the clatter of hooves and the measured pace of the soldiers creating a rhythm that seemed to resonate with the past itself. The flags fluttered proudly in the wind, each movement precise, each salute meaningful. It was more than ceremonial. It was a story being told without words, a story of courage, honor, and remembrance. As the parade continued, John's mind wandered to his family. He thought of his grandfather, imagining him marching alongside these soldiers many years ago. The letters he had read as a child suddenly felt alive, as if they had been written for this very moment. He could almost hear the voices of the past, whispering through the rustle of uniforms and the rhythmic clatter of horses. The experience was overwhelming, yet it filled him with a sense of purpose. He wanted to capture every detail, every emotion, so that he could share it with his family and friends, preserving the memory of this day just as the parade preserved the memory of those who had served before. John raised his camera, trying to frame the perfect shot, but he realized that no photograph could truly capture the feeling of being there. The sights, sounds, and emotions blended together in a way that was impossible to reproduce. He lowered his camera and simply watched, letting the experience sink in. The precision of the soldiers, the strength of the horses, and the unity of the crowd created a moment that was both humbling and inspiring. Every detail, from the shine of a sword to the proud lift of a flag, spoke of discipline, tradition, and respect. By the time the parade ended its first pass, John felt a deep sense of connection. He had come to London expecting to witness a historical event, but what he found was far more profound. He had witnessed a living memory, a tradition that linked the past with the present. The Belgian Cenotaph parade at Horse Guards was not just an event. It was a celebration of courage, a reminder of shared history, and a moment of collective reflection. As he made notes in his notebook and adjusted his camera for another series of photographs, John felt a quiet determination. He would not let this day fade into memory. He would carry it with him, share it with others, and keep alive the stories of bravery, honor, and unity that had inspired him since childhood. As the morning sun began to rise, casting soft light across the parade ground, John took one last deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. The sounds of the parade faded into the distance, replaced by the murmurs of the crowd and the occasional neigh of a horse. Yet the experience remained vivid in his mind, a vivid tapestry of sights, sounds, and emotions. He knew that this was just the beginning of his journey, that the story of the parade would unfold further in the hours to come. But for now, he simply stood there, grateful to be part of something greater than himself, a witness to history, honor, and tradition coming alive in the heart of London. The parade had begun, and John felt a surge of excitement mixed with awe. As he stood on the edge of the Horse Guards parade, he could feel the energy of the crowd around him. People whispered to one another, pointing out details and sharing what they knew about the history of the parade. The crisp winter air carried the sounds of marching boots, the low rumble of hooves, and the soft rustle of uniforms. Every sense seemed heightened, every detail more vivid than anything John had imagined. He focused his eyes on the Belgian contingent, now forming in precise lines. Their uniforms, polished and perfectly fitted, reflected a deep respect for tradition. The soldiers carried their flags upright, their expressions serious and composed. John felt a wave of pride for his homeland as he watched them move with such precision. He could almost feel the weight of history resting on their shoulders. the sacrifices of countless soldiers who had marched before them during difficult times, and the courage it must have taken to stand with discipline and honor. The royal guard, stationed nearby, began their ceremonial steps. Their red coats were bright against the gray London sky, and the tall bearskin hats added an air of majesty. Each movement was synchronized, as if the soldiers were moving to an invisible rhythm. John noticed the discipline in every step, the precision in every gesture. The soldiers' eyes were straight ahead, focused and unyielding, reflecting the commitment they had made to their duty. The horses, equally impressive, carried themselves with strength and grace, their polished hooves clicking against the parade ground. John could see the pride in the animals' movements, a silent understanding between horse and rider that had been cultivated over years of training. As the parade moved forward, John felt a sense of wonder. The rhythmic sound of marching, combined with the ceremonial music, created an almost hypnotic effect. He noticed how every small detail contributed to the overall impression. The shine of the soldiers' boots, the gentle sway of the horses' reins, the careful placement of every flag. He began to understand that this parade was more than a show. It was a carefully choreographed act of remembrance, a way to honor those who had given their lives and to celebrate the ongoing friendship between Belgium and Britain. Children in the crowd pointed excitedly at the soldiers and horses, their eyes wide with amazement. Parents lifted them onto shoulders so they could see better. John smiled, seeing their curiosity and excitement. It reminded him of himself as a child, reading about the world and imagining being part of something larger than life. He felt a sense of responsibility to capture the moment, not only in photographs but also in memory, so that he could share it with others and pass on the feeling of connection he was experiencing. As the parade continued, John noticed small moments that added to the ceremony's depth. One of the Belgian soldiers adjusted the strap of his uniform with care, a subtle act of preparation that reflected his respect for the occasion. A horse snorted softly, its breath forming a mist in the cold air, yet it remained perfectly calm and disciplined. John realized that these moments, though small, told a story of dedication, teamwork, and pride. Each soldier, each horse, each movement was part of a larger picture, a picture that honored history while inspiring those who watched. The music played by the military band added another layer of emotion to the scene. The steady drumbeats echoed through the parade ground, while the brass instruments created a sense of grandeur and solemnity. John could feel the vibrations in the ground beneath him, almost as if the rhythm of history itself was passing through the air. He noticed how the music guided the soldiers, helping them maintain perfect synchronization, and how the melodies seemed to stir something deep within the hearts of the spectators. For John, the combination of sight, sound, and emotion created a memory that would remain with him forever. As the Belgian contingent reached the center of the parade ground, John's attention was drawn to the faces of the soldiers. They were young, yet their expressions carried the weight of responsibility and pride. He thought about the countless hours of training that had brought them here, the discipline required to march in perfect unison, and the courage it took to stand tall under the gaze of thousands. John felt a deep respect for them, understanding that their performance was not only about ceremony, but also about honoring those who had served before them. He scribbled notes in his notebook, trying to capture not just what he saw, but what he felt, the sense of history alive in that very moment. John's gaze shifted to the crowd again, and he noticed people from all walks of life standing together in quiet attention. There were tourists, locals, children, and elderly citizens, all sharing the same moment of respect and admiration. He realized that the parade was more than a national event. It was a reminder of unity and shared humanity. In that space, differences faded, and everyone was connected by a common appreciation for courage, honor, and tradition. John felt a warmth in his chest, realizing that history could bring people together in ways that few other experiences could. As the parade continued its march, John noticed the careful coordination between the soldiers and the horses. Every movement was rehearsed, yet there was also a sense of natural grace. The horses lifted their heads proudly, their muscles rippling under their coats, while the soldiers maintained perfect posture and timing. John understood that this harmony between human and animal was a result of trust, training, and mutual respect. Watching it unfold in real time, he felt both awe and admiration. The precision was impressive, but the quiet bond behind it was what made the moment truly remarkable. At one point, the Belgian commander gave a subtle signal, and the contingent performed a ceremonial maneuver that drew applause from the crowd. The soldiers shifted in perfect unison, and the horses responded flawlessly, creating a moment of beauty and precision. John was struck by how much practice and discipline must have gone into achieving such perfection. He thought about the generations of soldiers who had come before, learning and passing down traditions that kept history alive. In that instant, he felt connected not only to the present ceremony, but also to the countless people who had made it possible over the years. The parade continued to move through the square, and John noticed small, intimate moments that made the event even more human. A soldier briefly adjusted the reins of his horse, ensuring comfort and safety. Another smiled subtly at a young spectator waving from the sidelines. These little gestures reminded John that even within the grandeur and ceremony, there was warmth, humanity, and connection. It was a living story, unfolding in real time, full of discipline, pride, and quiet humanity. John also took time to observe the reactions of those around him. Some spectators were silent, their eyes fixed on the parade, lost in thought. Others whispered to each other, sharing knowledge or asking questions. He saw parents explaining the significance of the parade to their children, pointing out the flags and explaining the history behind the uniforms. John felt a sense of continuity, how traditions and stories were passed from one generation to the next, keeping the past alive and meaningful. He realized that the parade was not just about honoring soldiers, it was also about educating and inspiring those who watched. As the parade reached the halfway point, John allowed himself a moment to breathe and simply absorb the atmosphere. The sound of hooves, the disciplined steps of soldiers, the fluttering flags, and the soft winter light all combined to create a scene of majesty and solemnity. He felt gratitude for being present, for witnessing history not just as a story in books, but as a living, breathing experience. It was a feeling he knew he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Finally, as the Belgian contingent prepared to complete their pass, John noticed the careful attention to detail in every movement. From the angle of a sword to the gentle guidance of a horse, every aspect reflected respect, training, and commitment. He felt a deep sense of admiration, not just for the soldiers, but for the tradition itself, the way it connected the past, present, and future in a single, powerful moment. John made a silent promise to himself. He would remember this day, share it with others, and honor the stories of courage and sacrifice that had brought him here. As the parade continued, John felt an unexpected wave of emotion washing over him. He had come to London expecting to witness an impressive display of discipline and tradition, but what he was experiencing now felt far deeper. It wasn't just about soldiers marching in perfect formation or horses moving gracefully across the parade ground. It was about connection, connection to the past, to his own family history, and to a larger story that stretched across nations and generations. John's eyes were drawn once again to the Belgian contingent. There was a young officer who seemed particularly focused, his posture upright, eyes straight ahead, and movements precise. For some reason, the officer reminded John of his great-grandfather. He had seen photographs and read letters that described a man with the same stern gaze and quiet dignity. Suddenly, The stories he had grown up with were no longer just words on paper. They were alive in front of him. The realization made his heart beat faster. Could it be a distant relative, or was it simply a resemblance? Either way, John felt a profound connection, as if time had folded upon itself, allowing him to see a piece of his own history come alive. The parade continued with its precise movements, yet John could hardly focus on the ceremony itself. His thoughts were filled with memories of the letters his grandfather had written. He remembered passages describing long, exhausting marches, nights spent in cold trenches, and the quiet moments of camaraderie that made the hardship bearable. His grandfather had written about the importance of discipline and honor, about the pride of serving one's country, and the unspoken bond between soldiers. Standing there, watching the young officer march with such focus, John could almost hear his grandfather's voice echoing in his mind, reminding him of the courage it took to stand tall in difficult times. John looked around the parade ground and noticed other spectators were similarly absorbed in the event, but for him, it had become intensely personal. He could imagine the countless stories of bravery behind each uniform and every horse that moved with such elegance and power. These were not just ceremonial figures. They were representatives of the past, living symbols of sacrifice and devotion. The realization made John feel both small and significant at the same time, small in the vastness of history, yet significant as a witness and recorder of these moments. As the parade progressed, John began to notice subtle details that had previously escaped him. The Belgian soldiers, for example, moved with an almost imperceptible rhythm, adjusting in perfect harmony with one another. He observed a young soldier gently patting his horse's neck to reassure it, a gesture so small yet filled with care. John understood that behind the precision of the parade lay countless hours of training, dedication, and patience. Every movement, no matter how small, told a story of discipline, trust, and respect. It was this hidden layer of human connection that moved him more than the parade itself. The royal guards nearby performed their ceremonial steps with the same careful attention to detail, yet John found himself drawn back to the Belgians. Their flags fluttered proudly in the winter wind, each color vivid and full of history. He thought about how these symbols represented not just nations, but ideals, courage, resilience, and unity. As he watched, he felt a deep sense of pride in being connected to this heritage. His camera was ready, but he realized again that no photograph could truly capture the depth of what he was feeling. He lowered it, deciding instead to absorb the experience fully, letting the moment imprint itself in his memory. Suddenly, the young officer John had noticed earlier performed a subtle maneuver that drew the attention of the crowd. The Belgian contingent shifted formation flawlessly, a display of skill that seemed effortless but was undoubtedly the result of rigorous practice. John felt a shiver run down his spine. Watching this, he thought about the generations of soldiers who had performed similar maneuvers in far more dangerous circumstances, on battlefields, in harsh conditions, carrying the weight of uncertainty and fear. The contrast between the ceremonial display and the reality of war made the moment all the more poignant. John felt an overwhelming respect for every person who had served and sacrificed, knowing that these ceremonies preserved their memory. As the parade moved further, John found himself thinking about the personal stories behind each soldier. He imagined young men and women who had trained for months or even years to reach this point. He thought about the families who had supported them, the nights of worry, and the pride that must swell as they watched their loved ones perform. The parade, while public and ceremonial, was deeply personal for those involved, and John realized that part of its power came from this shared human experience. Every step, every salute, every movement carried meaning far beyond the spectacle. In the crowd, John noticed a small child holding a Belgian flag, waving it gently as the soldiers passed. The child's eyes were wide with amazement, filled with curiosity and wonder. John smiled, seeing a reflection of his younger self, captivated by stories of history and adventure. He felt a sense of hope that traditions like this parade would continue to inspire future generations, just as the stories of his grandfather had inspired him. The thought made him feel connected to both the past and the future, a bridge between history and the present moment. The sound of the military band added another layer of depth to the experience. The steady drum beats and soaring brass notes seemed to echo across time, as if carrying the voices of those who had marched before. John closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over him. He imagined soldiers marching in distant fields, their footsteps in rhythm with the drum beats, their hearts filled with courage and determination. The music created a connection that transcended time and space, linking John, the parade, and the countless soldiers who had served long ago. As the parade reached the halfway point, John noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. There was a quiet intensity in the eyes of the soldiers, a deeper focus that suggested they were aware of the significance of this moment. He realized that they were not just performing for the crowd. They were honoring history, paying tribute to the lives that had shaped their nations, and preserving traditions that gave meaning to sacrifice. The thought made John feel a profound sense of gratitude, both for the soldiers themselves and for the opportunity to witness this living history. John's attention was drawn again to the young officer who reminded him of his great-grandfather. As the officer performed a precise maneuver, John felt a strange, almost magical connection. It was as if he could see his family history come alive in front of him, bridging the gap between generations. The sight brought tears to his eyes. For a moment, he forgot the crowd, the cameras, and even the parade itself. All that mattered was this feeling of connection, this realization that history was not something distant or abstract, but alive and present, moving before him in a vivid display of honor and discipline. The parade began its final sequence, and John could sense the emotions of the crowd rising. There were whispers of admiration, soft gasps at particularly skillful maneuvers, and quiet applause for moments of precision. He looked around and noticed people wiping their eyes, holding hands, or simply standing in awe. John felt that he was part of something much larger than himself, a shared experience that transcended nationality, age, or background. In that moment, he understood the true power of the parade. It was a living reminder of courage, unity, and the human spirit. Finally, as the Belgian contingent prepared to complete their pass, John took a deep breath and looked at the officer once more. He noticed the same sense of calm determination that his great-grandfather had possessed, a quiet confidence that came from discipline and purpose. The parade, he realized, was not just about ceremony. It was about preserving stories, honoring sacrifices, and connecting generations. It was about the human spirit, expressed through precision, grace, and respect. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had witnessed something truly extraordinary, a moment that would stay with him forever, etched in memory, heart, and mind. As the Belgian contingent finished its main march and the Royal Guard moved with perfect discipline, John felt a shift in the atmosphere. Until now, the parade had been a mixture of ceremony, history, and awe, but something deeper was about to happen. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, subtle but undeniable, as though everyone present knew that the most significant part of the day was approaching. John adjusted his camera, not wanting to miss a single detail, and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing gently on him. He watched as the soldiers formed precise lines around the cenotaph. The air was cold, and wisps of breath rose from the soldiers' faces, yet their focus never wavered. John noticed the slight tension in the horses' muscles, the crisp movements of the guards, and the steady rhythm of their marching boots. Every element, every gesture, was a testament to years of training and discipline. But beyond the technical perfection, John sensed something more profound, an unspoken acknowledgement that this was a moment of memory, respect, and reflection. The parade was no longer simply a display. It had become a bridge between past and present, connecting every soul present with the sacrifices of history. As the soldiers moved into position, John's thoughts drifted to his great-grandfather once more. The resemblance between the young Belgian officer and the man in the old photographs was striking. In that moment, John felt an overwhelming connection, almost as if his grandfather's spirit was present on the parade ground. The feeling was intense, almost surreal. Every detail, the officer's posture, the steady gaze, the silent confidence, seemed to echo the stories he had read as a child. John could almost hear the letters his grandfather had written, describing the fear, courage, and pride that came with service. The connection made his heart pound, a mixture of reverence, nostalgia, and awe. The moment of silence approached. It was the part of the parade that always carried the deepest significance, the moment when history, honor, and respect converged into something almost sacred. The soldiers and horses became still, the rhythmic clatter of hooves fading into a profound quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself recognized the solemnity of the occasion. John watched, holding his breath, feeling the emotion in the air like a tangible presence. Around him, spectators stood silently, many with heads bowed, some holding hands, all sharing a moment of reverent stillness. John's mind wandered to the countless stories of bravery and sacrifice that had led to this day. He thought about soldiers who had fought in distant lands, far from family and comfort, relying on courage and discipline to face unimaginable challenges. He thought about the letters written home, often containing hope and love, yet marked by fear and uncertainty. Standing there, John felt the weight of all those lives and stories pressing gently on his heart. He realized that this was more than a ceremony. It was a living memory, a tribute to humanity at its most courageous and resilient. As the silence stretched, John noticed subtle details that added layers of emotion to the moment. The officer he had been watching straightened his back, eyes fixed firmly ahead, yet there was a softness in his expression, a quiet respect that spoke of understanding and humility. One of the horses shifted slightly, its ears flicking attentively, as if it too understood the significance of the pause. John's chest tightened as he realized that every movement, every stillness, was part of a story that transcended generations. The parade was not merely observed. It was felt, experienced, and remembered by everyone present. Suddenly, the commanding officer of the Belgian contingent stepped forward to lay a wreath at the cenotaph. John's eyes followed the movement, capturing every step, every gesture. The wreath was a symbol, simple yet profoundly meaningful, a tribute to those who had served, a reminder of the cost of freedom, and a token of gratitude from one nation to another. As the officer bowed, John felt a lump form in his throat. It was a simple act, yet the emotion it carried was immense. The crowd, silent in reverence, seemed to collectively hold its breath, absorbing the weight of the moment. John's thoughts returned to his great-grandfather. He imagined him standing on a similar parade ground decades earlier, performing similar acts with the same dedication and respect. The realization brought tears to John's eyes. For the first time, history was no longer an abstract idea. It was personal, immediate, and alive. The parade had transformed from a ceremonial event into a deeply intimate experience, connecting John to a lineage of courage, honor, and resilience. Every detail, the glint of a sword, the steady hand of a soldier, the calm strength of a horse, seemed to echo stories of his family and countless others who had sacrificed for the greater good. The moment of reflection lingered longer than John expected. He noticed that the parade had paused, giving everyone present a chance to internalize the meaning of the ceremony. Children in the crowd were unusually quiet, sensing the gravity of the occasion even if they didn't fully understand it. Elderly spectators bowed their heads, their expressions a mixture of pride and remembrance. John felt a profound sense of unity, realizing that the parade was more than an event. It was a shared human experience, bringing together generations and nations through respect and honor. After the wreath was laid, the Belgian contingent stood in perfect formation, their expressions solemn yet dignified. John noticed that the young officer he had been observing remained composed, eyes forward, yet there was a hint of emotion in the slight lift of his brow and the gentle set of his lips. It was a subtle reminder that behind the precision of the parade were real people, with real feelings, performing acts of respect and remembrance that mattered deeply. John felt inspired by this combination of discipline and humanity, understanding that true honor lay not only in ceremony but also in the genuine emotion behind it. As the parade prepared to continue, John took a moment to reflect on everything he had witnessed so far. The ceremony had started as a display of skill and tradition, but it had grown into something far more profound, a connection to the past, a personal reflection, and an experience of shared humanity. He thought about the countless individuals who had contributed to the history being honored, from soldiers in the front lines to families supporting them from home. Every gesture, every step, every detail of the parade carried meaning, and John felt privileged to witness it all firsthand. The parade moved again, slower now, almost as if savoring each step. Soldiers and horses moved in perfect synchronization, but John noticed that the atmosphere had shifted. It was quieter, more thoughtful, and more reflective. Spectators seemed to watch with renewed focus, fully absorbing the depth of the ceremony. John himself felt a profound sense of clarity, realizing that the parade was not just about honoring the past, it was about inspiring the present and guiding the future. The lessons of courage, discipline, and respect were alive in every movement, every glance, and every gesture. As the final moments of this segment of the parade approached, John noticed a change in himself. The emotional intensity, the historical connection, and the sheer beauty of the ceremony had affected him deeply. He felt gratitude for being there, for witnessing history in motion, and for feeling a personal link to the sacrifices and bravery that had come before. He understood that this moment would stay with him forever, shaping the way he thought about courage, honor, and human connection. The parade had become more than an event. It had become a life-changing experience. Finally, as the Belgian contingent prepared to march off, John captured one last glance of the young officer. Their eyes seemed to meet, even across the distance and the crowd. In that instant, John felt a full circle of understanding, a connection across time, a recognition of shared history, and a profound sense of respect. He realized that the parade had not only honored soldiers of the past, but had also inspired those who witnessed it, passing on the torch of courage, discipline, and humanity. As the soldiers and horses moved away, the crowd began to stir, quietly discussing the ceremony and sharing their impressions. John stood still for a few moments longer, letting the experience settle in his mind. The emotions, the sights, and the sounds had left an indelible mark on him. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had not only observed a parade, but had connected with history in a personal and meaningful way. The Belgian Cenotaph parade at Horse Guards had reached a turning point, transforming from a ceremonial display into an unforgettable journey of emotion, reflection, and connection. As the Belgian contingent and the Royal Guard completed their final steps, John felt a mixture of awe, pride, and a quiet sadness. The parade, which had started as an impressive display of discipline and tradition, had evolved into something deeply personal and unforgettable. He realized that he had been part of a living memory, one that connected generations, nations, and human experiences through courage, honor and respect. The echoes of marching boots and the rhythmic clatter of hooves still seemed to linger in the air, a reminder that this moment, though ending in action, would continue to live in the hearts of everyone present. John watched as the soldiers slowly walked their horses off the parade ground. The movement was calm, almost reflective, in contrast to the precision and energy of the earlier performance. The royal guards and the Belgian contingent maintained their posture, yet there was a subtle relaxation in their expressions, as if they had completed a sacred duty. John noticed the young Belgian officer he had been watching for most of the day. He still carried himself with dignity, but there was a softness in his eyes now, a quiet acknowledgement that the moment had been meaningful. John felt a strange sense of closure, as though witnessing the officer's composed yet human reaction allowed him to fully process the emotional journey of the day. The crowd began to disperse slowly, murmuring in low voices as people shared their thoughts and reflections. Some were discussing the precision of the maneuvers, others spoke of the beauty of the horses and the elegance of the uniforms. But John found himself thinking about something more profound, the connection between the present and the past. He realized that what he had witnessed was not just a ceremony, but a story passed down through generations, carried by soldiers and honored by those who watched. The parade had become a living reminder of courage, unity, and the resilience of the human spirit. As he packed his camera and notebook, John's mind wandered back to his great-grandfather. He imagined him watching a similar parade many decades earlier, standing tall with a sense of purpose and pride. The resemblance of the young officer to his ancestor had been uncanny, and John felt as if a bridge had been built between past and present. It was a connection that transcended time, linking him not only to family history, but also to the larger story of those who had served their countries with bravery and dedication. This thought made his heart swell with a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. John decided to linger for a while longer, observing the small, intimate moments that often went unnoticed. Soldiers brushed down their horses, careful to maintain the animals' posture and comfort. Officers quietly exchanged respectful nods, and some shared brief smiles, a subtle acknowledgement of the shared effort and discipline that had gone into the parade. John realized that these small gestures carried just as much significance as the grand movements of the parade itself. They revealed the human side of an event that might otherwise seem purely ceremonial, a reminder that behind every uniform, every salute, and every disciplined step was a person with thoughts, emotions, and pride in their duty. As he walked around the parade ground, John noticed the expressions of other spectators. Children pointed excitedly at the horses, parents explained details of the ceremony to them, and elderly visitors stood quietly, lost in memories of their own past experiences. John felt a deep sense of connection to these strangers, realizing that the parade had brought together people of all ages and backgrounds to share a moment of respect and reflection. It was a reminder that history, when honored thoughtfully, has the power to unite people across time, culture, and nationality. John stopped near a small plaque commemorating the soldiers who had served and sacrificed. He read the names carefully, feeling the weight of their stories, their courage, and their commitment. The words etched in stone felt alive when combined with the memories he had just experienced. He imagined each name as a life filled with hopes, fears, and determination, and he felt humbled to witness a living tribute to their legacy. The parade had been more than a ceremony. It had been a reminder of the human stories that form the foundation of history. As he prepared to leave, John reflected on the lessons he had learned throughout the day. He thought about courage, not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it. He thought about discipline, which allowed individuals to work together toward a greater purpose. He thought about respect, the deep understanding that the past shapes the present and guides the future. These lessons were not abstract. They were alive in every step of the parade, in every gesture of the soldiers and horses, and in the quiet reflections of the spectators. John realized that the true power of the parade lay in these lessons, quietly imparted to everyone who had witnessed it. John walked away from Horse Guards Parade with a sense of fulfillment. The sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the historic ground. The streets of London, bustling and alive, felt different now, charged with a sense of history and human connection. John knew that he would carry the memory of this day with him forever. Every sight, every sound, every feeling would remain etched in his mind, a vivid reminder of the parade, the soldiers, the horses, and the countless stories of courage and sacrifice that had made the ceremony possible. That evening, back in his hotel room, John carefully reviewed the photographs he had taken. Each image captured a detail: the gleam of a sword, the proud stance of a horse, the focused expression of a soldier. But he realized that the true essence of the day could not be fully captured in pictures alone. The emotion, the connection, the sense of living history, it was something he had to carry within himself. He opened his notebook and began writing, describing not only what he had seen, but also what he had felt. He wanted to preserve the experience, to honor it in words and images, and to share it with his family and friends. As John wrote, he reflected on how the parade had affected him personally. It had awakened memories of his grandfather, connected him to his family history, and inspired a deeper appreciation for courage, discipline, and unity. He realized that witnessing the parade had been more than an act of observation. It had been an act of participation in history itself. By being present, by paying attention, by feeling the significance of each movement and gesture, John had become part of the story he had long admired. He thought about the young Belgian officer once more, the man who had reminded him so much of his great-grandfather. John hoped that he would continue to carry the same sense of discipline, courage, and honor that had inspired him throughout the parade. The officer had been more than a soldier performing a duty. He had been a symbol of continuity, a living link between the past and the present, reminding everyone of the importance of service, respect, and pride. John felt a profound sense of gratitude for having witnessed that connection firsthand. As the night settled over London, John allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought about the lessons of the day, the stories of bravery, and the enduring power of tradition. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that the parade had not only honored the past but had also inspired him to carry its lessons forward. Courage, discipline, respect, and connection, these were not just words. They were qualities that could guide his own life and inspire others. The Belgian Cenotaph parade at Horse Guards had given him more than memories. It had given him insight, understanding, and a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, as John prepared to leave London, he paused one last time at the edge of Horse Guards Parade. The ground, now quiet, seemed almost sacred after the energy of the previous day. He took a deep breath, absorbing the stillness, and felt a sense of gratitude for having been part of something larger than himself. The parade had ended, but its impact would remain with him forever. He understood that history, honor, and human connection are not just taught. They are experienced, felt, and remembered, and John knew he had been fortunate enough to experience all of that in a single, unforgettable day. As John walked away, he felt lighter, yet deeply enriched. The parade had left an impression that would shape his thoughts, his writing, and his perspective on life for years to come. It had reminded him that courage and honor are timeless, that history is alive when we engage with it fully, and that moments of connection, however fleeting, can leave lasting marks on our hearts. John knew that he would carry the memory of the Belgian Cenotaph parade at Horse Guards with him always, not just as a witness to tradition, but as a participant in a living story of courage, respect, and unity.